All right, I'm here today with Bryan Galloup, Galloup Guitars in Rogers Heights, Michigan, up here in northern Michigan. It's a beautiful spot. Galloup Guitars is a world-renowned, truly world-renowned luthier, which to the layperson means guitar maker.
It does.
And not only a guitar maker, but also, and I've verified this on Google, and I asked AI this question: what is the best luthier school in the world? And Gallup Guitars is hands and away the best guitar maker school that you're going to find on the internet. That here, right here in Rogers Heights, Michigan, in this beautiful, relatively remote spot of northern Michigan. It's a really incredible spot, and Bryan, you've earned an extraordinary reputation in your career. So I'm excited to dig into, how did this place get started? What the philosophy is. I had an opportunity to hang out with the team, which is a really cool and very talented and very humble group of people. And also sort of talk, because I don't even think I told you this, but I happen to be obsessed with the guitar.
No.
I've not been playing for I've been playing for about 3 years, and if I go a day without playing, I am very upset, and so I'm a bit of a fanboy right now. I feel like I'm in the I feel like I'm in the Playboy Mansion, and it's pretty incredible. So thank you for being on the show today, and for what you do here. So I guess the first thing I'm just curious is, like, what is the journey to Gallup Guitars of today, where you pop up first on searches for best luthier school in the world? You're selling guitars for $30, $40, $50,000 online that are obviously incredible instruments, works of art. I assume that you didn't just sort of start where you are today, but how did we get here?
Oh, that's crazy. And it's improbable, and that's why I like to say Rogers Heights instead of Big Rapids, because that even makes it even more improbable that this thing actually came together.
It is true, actually. And I don't mean to cut you off. When I moved here, because I lived in Big Rapids for a little while, and one of the first things people said was, there's a famous guitar school here, and it's like, wow. And I drove past it, and then I was like, this is incredible. But it's true. It's amazing, and it does make it more improbable.
It does. So my like both of us, me, I'm 65, so I grew up in an immediate post-Beatles, Ed Sullivan Show situation, and where all of a sudden there were, guitars everywhere, and they were just part of the scenery, and they were laying around, and everybody had one. Even into the 70s, in high school, there was always a guitar somewhere in the school or guitar circles. And, we did whatever. But
And you can move that, so it's...
Yeah, I was talking to you. I'll go like this. How's that? But, I finished school, and I wasn't going to be going to university. I wanted to do something in the trades, and I went into tool and die and did an apprenticeship in Reed City, actually, which, of course, Reed City is where I'm from.
Huh.
And it was great training. I can't tell you how important the training is that I received during the apprenticeship at a tool and die shop. Tool and die shops are just no bullshit. You go in there, they're the best of the best. These aren't guys welding and banging stuff out. We're making injection molds that make doors and panels of cars. And they are some of the best craftsmen I've ever been around, genius at math and application. So I came out of that with a real edge. But what I also realized during that apprenticeship, which I did appreciate, but I spent all day at the apprenticeship thinking about going to my guitar shop at night and working on guitars. So really I was dreaming about it all day and then doing it until 11 o'clock every night. So that's kind of like a sign.
So you built guitars, though? Like, when did you build your first guitar?
Well, it's more like when did I repair my first instrument? Because of being a luthier, which by the way comes from the word lute.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Okay. Lute. And
Makes sense.
And then back then, all those instruments were gut, and they didn't have any frets. And then they slowly started tying gut around the necks to where you could fret them and just slide it back and forth until they sounded good, and then sounded correct or in tune, and then they slowly put frets in. But a luthier is somebody that works on stringed musical instruments. You know, technically a piano does, but no,
Oh,
we're not.
interesting.
So it seems to encompass violins, violin family, guitars, banjos, mandolins, ukuleles, you know, tipples, things like that.
Wow.
So that's really what that comes from. So anyway, so I decided to step away from tool and die and move into doing anything that I could to try to keep touching the guitar, right? And that led me to Quinn's Music in Big Rapids. I got a little gig there, right? And you also may not know this, but if you can look this up in your data banks. Dan Earlywine was here about that time, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Earlywine family. Of course, you have Philip Earlywine, and the mom and dad, Phyllis, and God, I can't remember what the father's name is, but he worked at Ferris. And so Dan came in, and Dan was an amazing inspiration as far as someone that I could work with. I eventually, I was working at Quinn's Music during the day. I was out doing guitar repair. At night, I was playing music. You could still play music back then and make really good money. So that was kind of
So you are a player. I was curious about that.
Yeah, I'm a player of play guitar, but my sweet spot in the bands was bass.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, everybody wants to be the guitar player. No one wants to be the bass player. So that's where the money was.
Yeah,
So I'd sit back.
true.
I'd sit back there and kind of roll in, do my gig, and get out.
Nice.
But Dan had his shop, and just to clarify, Dan Earlywine literally went on to be the most famous guitar repairman in the world. Wow. He was here in his shop, and he built Albert King's Flying V, and he built guitars for Otis Redding, and he built guitars for Jerry Garcia. He also was in some very, very prominent bands in the Ann Arbor scene in the late 60s and the early 70s that were significant. So when he moved up here to be with his parents, and I had the opportunity to work with him, that was the master's class. This was a guy who could really play. He knew his instruments. He had a good 15 years on me. I mean, in fact, I came to work on his 40th birthday, and I was 23. And I knew a lot going in, but he knew other big-ticket items, about instruments that I had no idea. He also had techniques that he had picked up from other luthiers that were quick-fire learning for repairs. Again, with what we're talking about, it's not just making guitars, it's repairing guitars.
Right.
And the reason why I bring that up, because there are two different schools and different skill sets. And repairing an instrument, getting into it and getting out of it, and no one knows that you've been there, is a gig.
Yes.
And
That's true.
And my sweet spot was vintage acoustic guitars. I just loved them. Everything about them is interesting. The fact that someone can take wood and whittle it to make music, and then when you really get in deep, you realize that there's so much. It's one of those wonderful things. The more you dig into it, the more you realize there's a lot more to learn.
Totally. I was just talking with your guys out here, and in fact, I was talking to Tyler, and he was talking about the one of the pieces that he's working on, and how he was sort of nearing the end, and then there was it would have been impossible to see that there was like an imperfection deep in the wood, and then he had to sort of redo it, and he was like, bummed because he came so far, and then he had to correct this imperfection, but then it allowed him to actually create a new innovation and figure out how to do things even better in a way that really he's not even done it before. Maybe nobody's ever done it before. But I was saying, like, you're dealing with this is an organic material. And this is the reason that the acoustic guitar is still as popular as it's ever been since the invention of the lute, because it sounds, even with the electric options and so forth, which are cool, but, the acoustic guitar it sounds organic. It is organic. Mm-hmm. And that's, so then you're working with this thing that is one part science, acoustics, and all physics and all of these things, one part artwork, because they're visually just stunning, the pieces that you make here, and then the other part is you're dealing with like a nature. I mean, you're harnessing, you're working with nature. You can't work against wood.
You cannot work against wood.
So you're working with wood. That's why they say we're working with wood. But yeah, it's just an incredible. Honestly, it's an incredible discipline. because you're doing all of these things. You know, it's art, it's science, it's being part of really nature and harnessing it to create ultimately this other thing, which is music, which is its own, you know, beauty and unbelievable thing that exists. And I don't know, it really is. It's pretty thrilling to be here. And
you know, I want to come back, and there's about 4 or 5 things I was skimming. You know? In the first place, Tyler is an amazing luthier. He's been in the shop for, you know, more than a decade now, which is crazy to think about. And he was young when he came in and talented. Either he was going to be a luthier or he was going to go to school to become a state trooper, I think is what it was. Which,
interesting.
yeah, it's kind of like the Jethro Bodine, you know, a fry cook or brain surgeon. But and I'm really glad that he did, because his attention to detail, his execution, and truly today, he is in the top 5% in the world. And everybody's looking to him to see what he's going to be doing next.
It's incredible.
Amazingly, he still finds stuff to do next. And these 4 instruments that will be coming out of the shop in the next week, we'll get a group picture of those. One of mine, one that Micah built. Micah's 21, and he's coming on fast. He will be the next hot luthier on the scene.
That's awesome.
And then, of course, Tyler's will be an incredible. But, you know, you were talking about physics, you were talking about art, and I was on a forum for luthiers, and it is physics, you know, but, you know, where physics kind of fall apart is application. You know, it all sounds good, and it looks good on paper, and you get some great ideas, and then you go to try to do it, and you realize that
absolutely.
you got to go back a little bit here. But this one physicist was on this forum, and he said, you know, you can't tell a musician anything. And I thought that was one of the greatest quotes in the whole world, because, you know, the musician doesn't give a shit about the physicist, you know. He's just trying to find the pocket.
Yeah.
But to build a guitar at the level of what we're talking, even applies to electrics, but acoustic, flat top steel string guitar, which, by the way, is very much American.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that'd be cool to get into. I want to get.
No,
back
it's
into
that's American.
Oh,
it is. Before that, they were gut instruments. It was nylon string, and they made their way. That's why they even called them Spanish-style guitars, because they were flat-topped. And then in America, it adapted over to an X braces, and then they then started putting steel strings on it.
Interesting.
I mean, if you start looking at the data and the stats, we eclipse it by quite a bit.
Interesting.
But there's 17 points of coupling. There's 17 things that have to go together on that instrument. Nothing is random. Everything's weighed. Everything's weight and balances, and how you carve it and how you select it. The wood that we use on the top of our guitars, I actually fly to Europe once a year just to buy wood. I go there, go right to the sources in Italy and Switzerland, and they're used to it. It's those are family businesses. And I come away with 100% success. So if I go through 200 tops, I'll end up with 30 tops that meet, you know, my standards.
Wow.
The woods that we use on the back and side is Brazilian rosewood, which, by the way, is illegal to run across borders unless you have the paperwork, which I do. But
Good
it's not
thing
just.
You said that.
Huh?
A good thing you said that. We don't have to cut it.
No, I do. CITES. Wow. It's okay to have Brazilian,
yeah, sure.
and you can build guitars out of it. But, you know, once it leaves the border, it's not coming back in. Wow. Whatever you do, don't take it to Germany. They'll destroy it, I think.
Really?
But mine all has papers. But it's not just because it's rare and it's pretty, which it is. It's just the best sounding wood.
Yeah.
There's no oil. It sounds like it taps like iron, and so. The difference between a musical instrument, a world-class musical instrument, and as with anything, dragsters, Formula One cars, you're paying for the last 10%.
Sure.
That's where all the money
Yeah.
is.
Oh,
right?
yeah. That's well said. Yeah.
And so if you have a person, which, by the way, that's a lot of money, but if you have a person that's their passion, and everybody thinks a star, but no, these are people, just regular people that that's all they think about is to practice and to play and get better.
I can sympathize with that.
Oh yeah, and ultimately the guitar itself is a conduit for the person trying to get what's in here admitted to be out into music.
And what's in here?
What's in here? And then once it comes together, and if that musical instrument can be a part of that, then the job is done. But here's the deal. the pure definition of a world-class musical instrument at that level means that it makes the players do things they wouldn't normally do.
Whoa.
They aren't just there. All of a sudden they go, wow, I was never able to do that before. I was never able to move through that passage with that ease. Or it was out of tune. Or what is that this particular instrument's doing? It has this natural reverb. It's inspiring me, to do something. And and so once you have that, and if you're truly passionate about it, that's one ticket item. The other one is take it away from those guys. And they're going to do everything they can to get it back.
Oh yeah, now they're addicted.
Yeah, they're in.
That's cool.
They play
Cool.
an instrument. They go, I'm not spending $25,000.
Then they play and they're like, I'll spend more than that if I have to.
Yeah, I'm going to get one.
Wow.
I have a friend of mine who's
Don't let me play one, please.
Oh, you're definitely playing. Just give me your wallet first. But that's the definition of a world-class musical instrument. And yes, the art does come into it.
Sure.
But Tyler Robbins, more than me, because I moved past wanting to do true custom work for people. There's a lot of telephone calls and conversations. It's not that I don't care for them, my customers in that way. I just had other things I have to do.
Sure.
So I make my instrument. I don't have. They can't really say outside of my palette of woods. They can't say I want to use this tone wood from wherever. I go, no, I don't do that. These are my instruments. I know what it's going to take to make them sound right and play right, and these are the woods I use. These are my 3 models. I'm not changing a lot. I have some little variances I can mess around with.
Yeah.
But then I generally talk to the person and ask them what their favorite color is, what's their favorite artist, and maybe a few other things. And then I kind of tailor that guitar a little bit. But let's say the customer didn't want it, then that guitar is still very much relevant to someone else.
Sure.
I'm finishing one right now for a customer that's in Phoenix, and I lived in Phoenix for a while, so I always wanted to do something with a Southwest feel. So I used some Recon stone that has that kind of a turquoise look, and then the lines on my guitars, which are very much Deco or Frank Lloyd Wright driven, I just kind of made cactuses out of them a little bit. So it's that's the fun stuff right there.
Sure.
But I'm not over the top like Tyler. Tyler is off the hook.
I'll tell you what, yeah, I was actually hanging out with him, and he was doing some stuff, and he showed me some of his designs. And I guess the first thing I would say about Tyler is his humility is off the charts, because for a guy who's top 5% in the world, and I think this is probably why he's top 5%, but he keeps talking about what he wants to learn next. What is he going to try next? What is he going to do next? He's definitely not bragging about. He certainly didn't tell me he was top 5% in the world, but I could tell that I'm talking to a guy who's impeccable, who's brilliant, who's dialed in on what he's doing. And of course, like most people that are really good at what they're doing, they're focused on what else could they do.
They're focusing on the bigger picture.
Yeah.
If you the art that's related to my guitars, and this also goes back many years ago. I was talking to a former apprentice named Chris Morimoto, and I said, the idea is that you do something on your guitars, and then you have this, and the next time you do something, it's relative of that, and it's a conversation with this, and it slowly evolves. And Tyler's done a great job at that, but the entire shop really operates like this. We're always
you could tell it was a group of people that were just passionate. The passion. And the other thing that the group was talking about was, which I thought was quite cool because it wasn't what I expected, is yes, it's art. Yes, it's this nebulous organic thing. And at the same time, apparently you guys are employing real scientific instrumentation to determine the densities of wood, to gather data on shapes and sounds and that sort of thing. So it's that marriage of science and nature that you're...
The science of sound.
Yeah.
We were at the forefront of the science of sound in relationship to guitars in America 20 years ago. And not to forget that the violin world, which of course is an insane group of people, for how passionate they are, but I'm sure there's their prima donnas and egos in there, but they're concerned about the violin and they're concerned about the performance. And I wanted to try to bring that discipline into our into our way of thinking, into our community, which is flat top steel strings and ultimately into electric guitars. But science is what we fell into. When you said densities, when you brought up densities, is that just something you thought about, or were the guys talking about that out there?
No, they were talking about that.
Densities.
They were talking about, how a certain wood will absorb more sound, and then also the thickness. So if you want a guy who's going to play bluegrass, you'll give him a certain wood density and things like that, and that you can actually obtain a real consistency in the way that an instrument's going to sound relative to what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, the word in wood or in acoustic guitars is admittance. That's the number one word you want to be paying attention to, and that's the ability of the wood and the guitar to turn the energy that you're providing and admit it to be turned into sound. And to do that, there's a lot in the bag. So our system has been in full swing since about 2012, 2014. And it calculates, of course, density and speed of sound and sound radiation coefficient. But we also have our own patented software and equations that's the first of its kind really ever. Certainly in the guitar world, that's for certain. So that is a software that the guys use throughout the shop, and we haven't really let it out because we still were looking at it as proof of concept. Like, it did do good stuff, and I could find the wood I was looking for, but it didn't tell me what to do with all of the wood. And so now we've built guitars long enough. There's I don't know, like 12,000 pieces of wood in that database, hundreds upon hundreds of guitars. We used it to make Tyler's instruments, my instruments, and of course Adam and the guys. But the next thing that we're using it for, which is exciting, is reverse engineering of old guitars. So we take all the data points. Yeah, we take all the data points that we have for making guitars, so it gives us insights into what a guitar must have sounded like when it was made new in 1930. We say, if it does this, then it probably was there. But we're going to have to, but you have to physically make guitars to prove that. Otherwise, you're just, it's just theory. So that's actually clicking along. There are people out there that can make better examples of those vintage guitars than I can. They're payoff. But in a scientific approach, even though you could cut corners and get to the good sounding guitar faster, you have to learn everything every step of the way, or that chain of science is thrown off.
That's cool.
You have to have that data.
Yeah.
It takes longer, and it's a little more frustrating for people. It's not frustrating for me, but other people say, well, you could have just done this and it would have been better sounding. I go, yeah. The most improbable thing in the world.
So let's talk about, the improbability part. So you meet a guy, he's a world-class guitar.
15 years, my senior, Dan
Yep.
Early Wine.
And then so how do you make the leap? And one of the things that I always talk about, in my experience, in the path that I've traveled in this life, a lot of it's about overcoming the fear, whether it's the fear of failing, fear of, embarrassment, fear of financially, ruining yourself and all this. Being an entrepreneur is difficult enough. Being an entrepreneur in something as technically difficult as being a world-class luthier and all that. I mean, and just the risk of art, right? Art is a risk every time you do it. You can make a guitar and somebody will laugh at you. And, how did you go say, okay, I'm going to have this skill. One, I'm going to put a lot of time into developing it because I'm sure you're not born as a world-class luthier without a tremendous amount of work. And then I'm going to make the leap. I'm going to start this thing. I'm going to advertise a school. Like, what's that journey been for you?
Well, when it started to attempt to work on guitars, I'd already been in the building trades. I've already built houses with my father, being a machinist, plus automotive, plus gunsmithing, and all the stuff. So when I started working on guitars themselves, it was from a technician standpoint, and there were so many terrible, not even qualified to string a guitar up, sort of guys out there, that they were pretty easy to get out in front of them. Next thing you know, I had a lot of work. Most importantly, I could get into an instrument and get out of it, and you didn't know that I was there. I did focus on old Martins and old Gibsons, and they have their quirks. They have their quirks, but if you figure out what that is, you can move through that pretty easily. And then at a point, I was sitting in Rogers Heights at a little strip mall down here, and the UPS truck stopped every day, dropping off guitars, picking up guitars. So from my technician standpoint, I didn't really have a lot of fear. It was very technical. I mean, it was like changing a tire. It was you find your materials, frets, you learn how to get instruments apart and how to get them back together. So that didn't really, I was only really scared once when Dan Earlywine said he was leaving and I had the phone number and now I had to take care of the customers. That was a week of panic, but we figured it out.
Well, it is. I mean, but really, you probably understate it now because it's 30 years ago or whatever, and you're wildly successful. But I'm sure at that moment, you had two options, really, because you could have been like, this is crazy, and this guy just left. He's the best there ever was, and now I'm standing in his shoes, and I've got a list of customers who are going to really not like me if I screw their guitars up.
That's spot on. And, he was also going on, excuse my throat.
No problem.
I don't know where that came from. Was also moving on to greater things. Mm-hmm. In a situation like ours, you can't sit there and do the same thing over and over and over. For our type of mind, it's just not great. So he needed to move on. He needed to grow.
Yeah.
I ended up with the shop, and again, I was technical stuff. I was fret jobs and bone nuts and saddles and setups and neck resets and regluing bridges. And those instruments were valuable to me because I knew their musical quality, but they hadn't experienced the vintage boom, which happened 1980, 1981, started to really hit. So there were instruments I was working on that were worth $600-700. It was still a lot of money back then. And then all of a sudden, after 80, 81, they went to 2,000, then 4,000, then 6,000. Those very same instruments today average around $240,000 a piece. But so that's where I learned what a great, world-class instrument could be. Of course, I was dealing with an instrument that at that point was 60 years old. Now they're 100 years old. Mm-hmm. But that's what got me thinking about building instruments. Also, I went to some conventions, and I got a chance to bump into some very important luthiers, Carleen Hutchins, her work in violin world, which, by the way, the violin family is the pinnacle gold standard of what can happen with instrument acoustics when being carved out of wood. Those guys figured it out, master to apprentice, hundreds upon hundreds of years ago. Everybody thinks that the top of the peg head on that is a pretty looking scroll. Well, that's beautiful, when actually it's actually carved to a weight and balance to control the node to fall into the nut. There is nothing on a violin that isn't a master's class in that.
Really? That's
so
cool.
When I was dealing with other instruments, old Martins, old Gibsons, and I had already been exposed to these people, believe me, I wasn't their apprentice. I just was lucky enough to be in the room. Sometimes that's all it takes.
That's true.
Then I was able to start applying it to flat, and then I started building. Like you were talking about wood, I went and grabbed this as we were fixing a camera, but this piece of wood is Italian spruce.
Okay.
And if you hold it like this, right about here, right about there, go down a little bit more. Okay. Go down a little more. A little more. Don't let the meat of your hand touch here.
Oh.
And you tap it, you can actually hear it.
Oh, wow. You can.
Yeah.
That's
cool. Listen to this. Now, that's called the 0220 node. That's the piece of wood flexing like this and like this. If you hold it here, it's dead. Once you find that, then you can really get it to ring. And so that piece of wood has a different characteristics than this piece of wood. This one here is going to be sparklier.
Oh, yeah.
And it has a different ringtone to it.
True. Also,
if you hold it in that same spot, you can feel it in your fingers.
Oh, you can, too.
You bet you can.
It rings, it buzzes a lot more than you can even hear.
That's because it's stiff and light, but stiff and light doesn't equate to better sounding. It just equates to a different characteristic that has to be used. Okay. And this piece of wood is right in the middle. Now, this was hand-selected in Switzerland.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. And then ultimately, I mean, the string is causing the whole instrument to vibrate.
You-
Or is it
you
the
are.
air. What is actually creating the sound in a guitar?
Well, it's all tied together. First off, you're the energy, and then you excite the strings, and on its way to the bridge and the saddle, 80% of that's dispersed. 70% of it's dispersed as heat, so you're really only able to work with about 30% of that sound.
Okay.
And at that point, it hits the saddle, hits the bridge, and if it's high end, that's kinetic energy, but it's the whole thing working together that makes every sound. For example, the low end of an instrument or the depth of what you're listening to, that's generated by the box working, right? So you got the very lows, low mids range are in that, but when you get above that, then that's things resonating off the face of the guitar itself.
Really?
And if it has a mahogany back, then it has a warmer tone because it's coupling with the top more. In other words, by note, it's closer. And then if you get into a rosewood back, it's easier to get the note higher in that, so it's a reflector.
Wow.
If the notes get close to each other, it's warm around the guitar. If the notes are further away, where the back is lifted, then it projects better.
Wow.
Two different instruments.
That's pretty cool.
In the violin world and in symphony, first chair, second chair, third chair, I don't believe a lot of times. It's not because one's better than the others. They have their different jobs. And for those different jobs at those chairs, they have different instruments that they're using to perform
Really?
those jobs. Yeah.
So the first one has to pierce. Is that the idea?
There's soloing instruments, of course, and we see that. But when you get into there's a reason why there's a saxophone, a tenor sax, a bari sax. There's a reason why all those
Yeah.
instruments exist.
Yeah, and that's pretty.
In,
so I-
in the violin world, you have violin, viola,
yeah.
cello,
Yeah.
3/4, full bass.
Yep. No, it's pretty interesting. I read this thing. I think maybe you know this quote. Otherwise, I'm going to butcher it, and it'll be what it's going to be. The point will be the same. I can't remember if it's Bach or Beethoven, but he was talking about how the guitar is the most amazing instrument because you have the full register of an orchestra at your fingers. So you can go from effectively, your bass, maybe cello, all the way up to like a soprano note on the high end, on the dusty end. But it's that you can play like an entire symphony's register with one single instrument, which is very unique.
I think that was Segovia.
Okay, you might be right.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And but no, it's amazing. It's a versatile instrument. It
Yeah.
could be a vocal accompaniment. If you're talking about nylon or gut string, it has that special thing it does, which is a different instrument, really. I mean, it's fan fret but so many people during the folk boom played those rather than steel strings. Steel strings, you can play roots music, you can play bluegrass music. You see it everywhere. So one of the few things that you can walk up to a campfire with a case and pretty much do it all.
Oh, and I do.
Yeah,
It's the funnest thing you will ever do in your entire life, in my opinion.
It's a pretty versatile.
Yeah.
That's why it's always been so popular. It's why it
Yeah.
will never go away.
Yeah. No, so, and you speaking of old Gibsons, and I was actually speaking with your guy, is it Matt? Who's the guitar, the repair guy right in the middle bench there? He was in front.
Adam?
Was it Adam? Mm-hmm. He's the kind of the tall guy?
Yeah, Adam.
Oh, yeah. So I was talking with Adam about, I have my dad's Gibson SJ from 1969 that he gave me, which is a really sweet instrument. And I'm going to bring it in here. He's going to take a look at it. I think the bridge is lifting up a little bit. But I fell in love with the guitar about, I don't know, a little over 2 years ago. I was home. Actually, my mother passed away. And I was home, and my dad had this guitar, which I didn't even know played. He's been a drummer my whole life, so I grew up around him playing in the bands and things like that. I never knew that he really played the guitar. I always saw the guitar cases in the basement because he never played them. And he was like, I'm not going to play this. You should take it home. And I just kind of messed around. And the first time I got a chord to ring, it's like the most incredible feeling that you'll ever have. And from there, it's just like I can't go a day without letting at least one chord ring out. But
SJ, Southern Jumbo.
yeah, it's
SJ,
it's a nice guitar.
69. They had some really good ones. That's not known as Gibson's best vintage, but they had some really great ones during that time period. The Hummingbird, the Dove, the SJ. Those were great ones. I'd love
Yeah.
to see it.
Yeah, I'll bring it
I'll
up.
bet you it's in good shape.
It's yeah, I would say relatively, yeah. It's got, it's like Adam was saying, it's got the mojo, right? It's got the little, it's, the finish is cracking, but it's not, the guitar's not cracking, it's just the finish. But it's in great shape. I play it every day.
That's when they get good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, you were talking about all of the data stuff and all that, and how you develop that, and you've developed this software. What was the impetus for that? Did you start off as a data guy, like a data nerd when it comes to acoustics and that, or did you meld into that as you started and you wanted to get to the next level?
I was already doing the data thing because I was a tool and die maker. All right, there was there.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know.
So there's the intersection of your background.
Yeah, I didn't know that those two things were going to come together until one day I was making guitars, and they were good. You look and go, Bryan, this is a good guitar. Yeah. Well, a couple things were wrong. Number one, it wasn't a great guitar. Number two, it wasn't a great musical instrument. I didn't know how to get there, but I knew I needed to, because at that point I'm already in. I mean, I'm into a career by X amount of time. I have a school that's thriving, is taking off. And from a standpoint of being an educator, I have to know this stuff. Why would someone want to go to a school if the instructors weren't selling guitars on the open market demanding the highest prices, and also they have to know their
That's a
stuff?
good point.
So I started looking around, and the schools just weren't doing that. I go, well, that's definitely going to be a sweet spot for me. The other thing was, I was making guitars, but I wasn't making musical instruments, and I needed to bust that threshold away from being a technician, but yet not leave technician behind, because both disciplines are important.
Sure.
Many individuals have, of course, done that over the years, and I can name them. There's not a lot, but they're important. We all kind of always stand on the shoulders of giants. If you look around far enough, or sometimes you think back, you just don't know the important events when they happen. But
Yeah.
But the other thing is, my consistency was horrible. I would think, okay, I have it, and then I'd make another three. I go, well, that sucks. That's not where it needs to be, and that's not going in the right direction. So that's when I started applying the science and the math to every piece of wood. We would check its density and make sure that we had that down. Then we started checking its stiffness, and then everything about music is frequencies and vibrations, and that's a complete, master's class in weight imbalances, stiffness, Young's modulus. And it sounds like a lot, but once you get into it, it's just incredibly fun.
Yeah.
And what's really fun is when you start getting results, when your guitars are getting better.
Yeah.
Any luthier, all the ones that I know, we're all, we know more about these subjects than is likely healthy. You laugh.
I'm sure that's true.
No, you laugh, but there comes a point you become pretty one-dimensional. But when you can get to where you're finally balancing and controlling those items, and you're making the guitar that's the sound that's in your head that you've experienced in another instrument or something unique to you, and you get to where you can actually do that consistency.
Oh yeah.
That's the wave.
That's amazing. And that sort of goes to the, I learned this whole progression of learning. And as you're talking about teaching, because that's, so, if you, basically the stages of learning something is repeating it or memorizing it. Then it's sort of morphing what you know into something else. Then it's creating from scratch, and then it's teaching. And when you start to teach something, you actually learn so much. Because like you said, if you're going to teach it, you must know it. And you can't just be able to do it. You have to know why, the whys and the hows. And so to get to that level of now you're a master who's teaching, the amount that you level up your knowledge is incredible, and that's a really good point. Is as one thinks about mastering something, the best way to do that is decide you're going to teach it, and then you'll learn all the things you didn't know when you start to try and explain it to somebody, and you're like, nah, I can't really tell you why, but this is just what I do.
All of the great luthiers that I know, none of them would ever call themselves a master luthier. Mastery is a very elusive thing, and the more you get into it, the more you realize you don't know. Even though when it gets to the, by the time you're 65, other people look at you and they go, wow, there's some shit in there that I don't know. I'd like to get inside that head a little bit. And I thought the same thing when I met Carlene Hutchins. I brought her up. And Lloyd Lohr was not somebody that I ever met because he worked for Gibson back in the 20s, but he was an acoustician and a musician that brought together a lot of concepts for us. But there are so many great luthiers that have, kept the ball rolling along the way. And what was the point you were just bringing up? I started.
Like if you want to.
Oh, teaching.
Teaching.
You
have to decide you're going to teach it, and you will be the.
Yeah. So teaching it in the school, and I always said to the guys, you're going to be teaching in the school. You have to do it. And there's nothing that'll whip you into shape faster than that. Yeah. And if you're sitting there, applying these ideas, and then you get an actual physicist that's taking your class, that's the acid test right there.
Yeah.
And again,
which I assume has happened.
Oh yeah. If you're talking about weights and balances, and then someone takes your class that their living is making fighter jets, where everything is weight. At the most umpteenth level, we generally end up at Schuberg's having a beer, and I end up being the student. It's a collaboration. My school is a collaboration where keep the doors open. It's organic. It's got a very cool feel downstairs. It's a really old school guitar shop still.
Oh, totally. I can tell you that, just the feeling when you walk in here, it's special, and I think it's the first thing is the people. The first thing you notice is that the people are, one, enjoying this immensely. And you can sort of see them each individually as we're eating lunch, like drift off, and I can tell like they're thinking about like a design or a guitar or something, and they're just, and then they start talking about it. They love it. They love what they do, which is the first thing. The place is again, it's like, it's just out of another time.
I can tell you this for certain. There's no other shop like this in the United States.
I believe it.
They're great shops and they do great things, but this is a unique place. It's a place of learning. It's a place of training. It's a place of sharing. It's not a petri dish. It's not a melting pot. It's more like a fiery crucible. If people say that, and it kind of turns them off a little bit. But no, this is we attack things.
Sure.
We go, no, we're going to figure this out. What are they talking about?
And that's exactly how they all talk. The one sort of the one acknowledgement. What was the guy's name that did the Flying V one that we were talking to?
Will Bazard.
Okay. So the one acknowledgement was when Will was talking about the guitar that he made for
his buddy,
his idol, favorite musician, now friend, who tours and played his guitar on tour, and the amount of just satisfaction that gives you. That's got to be incredible to put an instrument in somebody's hands and see them do that thing. I couldn't do this before. I couldn't. An instrument made me better. That's got to be just so satisfying. And you can let yourself feel that, I hope.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of different emotions there. I'm sure some people feel it differently. But for the people in this shop, when we see someone playing our guitars in a format like that, which doesn't happen a lot for me, my guitars aren't campfire guitars and they aren't touring guitars. They are, they're like they're like a Formula One car. You don't take it four-wheeling.
Exactly.
But they're in your studio, in your bedroom.
Yeah.
So I want to get a chance to experience. But all the great luthiers I know, they don't really get an ego trip from that.
That's what amazed me.
And when they see their guitars being played, they're listening to the sound and they're listening to the performance and they're listening to the player and they think, how is that collaborating? Is this inspiring him? Yeah. We don't see the guitar, and we don't even see ourselves up there.
This is a job. I think that's the thing that I finally figured it out as you said that, because I was like, if I did this, I'd just be all over it. I'd be like telling you every song that's ever been played on my guitar, and you know, what is very obvious here is that everybody's just trying to solve the next problem. They're looking at this as a job.
Sense of purpose.
This is a professional, the most professional, the pinnacle of professionalism in this discipline. And I don't want to say that it makes it less enjoyable, but it's not like there's not like posters on the wall, you know, of people holding Galloup guitars because you want to show everybody who's playing your guitar. It's like this is what it means to be a professional. And it's funny, it's somewhat of a dichotomy sometimes when the people that are the best, they are so professional that they don't appear to have the same exuberance that you think. Like me not being in this, I'd be like, if I made a guitar that was this good, I'd be a million pictures of it and I'd show everybody, I'd let everybody play it. I probably would bring it to a campfire and ruin it. And it's just different. You guys are pros, man, and it totally shows.
Well, we appreciate that. And like I've already said, we're in deep. Yeah. And there is a point where you look at, well, this is definitely my chosen path. And if you show up to your job every day and you absolutely want to be there, you know, and there are tough times. Yeah. I mean, you were talking about, you brought up Tyler Robbins, who had a guitar literally finished, and there was one little flaw in the face, totally cosmetic. But, you know, this is an expensive guitar. This is above 40,000 grand guitar. And he just stopped. He sat down, had to get a drink of water. I could see it on his face. And he ripped that neck off and ripped that top off and went right back at it. You know?
He told me that story.
Only a few people in this world would be insane enough to do that.
And you can tell. I mean,
that's what makes him the best.
The sort of honestly, as he was telling me that story, the thing that comes to mind is like tortured genius. You know, it's like it's the torment of perfection. And the fact of the matter is, perfection is not necessarily fun.
Oh, there are many people who have come through this shop where, you know, by the time it was done, they didn't necessarily like me anymore. But the thing of it is, and I say that because, you know, I wish everybody the best, and I love all those guys. But if you're going to be in this shop, you are going to end up leaving a good luthier, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
and that's that way with many things. But if, like, I come back to that, if you really want to be here, if you show up and this is someplace that you can't wait to get back to, and I know work starts at 8, but you end up being here at 6, or you end up working till 9, you're in the right spot.
Totally. No, it's cool. And the other thing that I think it's inherent, and I was talking to Tyler actually about this, because we were talking about that whole fear thing and how starting something, there's a fear in creating. And what you guys are is creators. I mean, it's actually the first time for me, it was very interesting walking around and just seeing what is a block of wood. You know, now obviously it's different wood, so don't take the strong way, but you would expect to see, like in a Home Depot, just square blocks of wood. This will become a guitar one day. And it starts off as this square block of wood. I don't generally walk around in a guitar store and think about, oh, that used to be a block of wood. It looks like a guitar. But you're taking something and creating it. And that is that whole war of art concept. Like you have to force yourself to start it. And that's usually the hardest thing, is like that first scratch, that first design, that first whatever. And then when you do get to the end and it's that blemish that probably you would be the only person that even knew about, you know, and that fear then that washes over you of then one, telling the client, which to me, like I said, I think that becomes a cooler story for the client, because now he's like, this is such a bespoke, unique, custom thing that like this guy, you know, wasn't even happy with it. He ripped it apart and did it twice just to do it. You know, like to me, that's pretty cool.
When you're dealing with musical instruments like ours being built at this level, or anything, and if you're commissioning or working with someone, you really have to give them a lot of space and don't call them to ask them how they're feeling or where the guitar is. Because if there's something wrong on a musical instrument in this shop and we don't like it, we may even make another one, but there certainly could be being retopped. And at that point, we're paying attention to that customer.
Sure.
And we're thinking really about the guitar, and the customer for us is don't take this wrong, but it's really a secondary thing.
Yeah,
we
sure.
already know what we're going to do. We can do this.
Yeah.
And we've taken it to these other accounts, and we know the little things that we can change to make it work for him. But he's already decided that he wants a Galloup guitar or that he wants a Robbins guitar. He doesn't want to interject himself into it. So leave him alone. When your time comes around, the one thing that you can count on at this level is that when we are making your guitar, we're paying attention to you.
Yeah. And that was what I was sort of when he was telling me that story, what I was seeing, and probably was maybe subliminal for him and maybe for everybody here, but you're actually really you're giving. You're thinking about, so you're creating a tool that lets somebody else give their gift of music. And this is a very, empathetic, like you are thinking about, and then taking it to the level of now I'm going to teach people how to do this. That's like the ultimate in giving people something, giving them yourself, giving them your shop, giving them this career path, these set of skills, so that they can in turn give of themselves to pour over this thing, and probably agonizingly at times, that then this person gets to use to give their gift of music to somebody else.
Or their gift of music to themselves in their basement, in their living room like this. They just want to sit down and try to get the right side of the brain to connect with the left, try to get any, emotion or feel out, satisfaction out of that, But when the school, it's an interesting gig. I've been doing it for a long time. I've had a lot of students come through here. And
how many would you say?
Well, it's not really fair to count students. We need to be counting training sessions because some students may come back for more than one session.
Oh, yeah.
But it's an entirely, even though it's the same student, it's an entirely different topic. But, we're in the ballpark of 2,800 sessions right now.
2,800?
Yeah.
Holy
Which for a lot of people, they say that's not a lot. And I go, that is a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
When you're dealing...
This is an intensive thing, too. It's not like a hobby. It's not like you're going to a pottery class. You're coming here, you're living here.
Yeah, well, you're also in a trade shop, so safety is number one.
Sure.
No one's going to cut a finger off or lose an eye in my shop.
Nope.
I mean, that's just number one. So there's techniques that we teach that don't use certain tools, and students can't use those tools until they've moved on in further training around the shop.
Yeah.
And there's always a teacher or an intern with them at all times.
Sure.
But what we teach in the school, and it's a tiered level. You have the journeyman's class, the technicians, and then our artist series classes. But it's an elevation of skill level, and as we move down through it, it's not that you had carved a third neck. You don't really need to. You need to know at this point why that neck could make the guitar sound better.
Yeah.
We need to evolve, the technical skills, and then try to bring in the musical portion of it.
And so there's what is the training? What's the periods of time? You have like a 2-month class, a 6-month. How does that work?
The original class was 2 months. You build one electric and one acoustic, which nobody builds that many in any other school in the world.
Wow. So in 2 months, you built 2 guitars.
Yeah, one's parts off of a CNC, the electric guitar, but you get to go through CAD and the CNC and vacuum jigs, and you learn some stuff. Plus, on that instrument, you learn how to spray a satin finish and do sunburst and an oil finish on the neck. And that's the one instrument that we use to learn electric guitar setup, how to make the bow nut, place a bridge, set intonation, guitar electronics. So there's a whole bunch of things that you learn, but it's now take it with you.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want. And then everybody's required to build a flat top steel string. And there you learn the next level of stuff, which is woods, weights and balances, run out, carving with chisels, cutting binding slots, neck resets. But at the same time, we start tapping on things a little bit. We'll walk by with students, and they got their top. We go like this. And we just walk away because they're going, like, what? Okay, what's going on? You can see they're thinking. You can see they're starting to tap on that wood now. And so that's the 2-month class. And there's a series of repairs that fall into that go parallel with the lessons that we're teaching, but they have to know how to refret an instrument. That's just a great money maker. Certain bread and butter jobs that keep the doors open. In the second term, they move on to build one instrument. it's either going to be the set neck electric guitar or it's going to be the fingerstyle instrument, which just moves to a different level of instrument voicing.
Yep.
In the first guitar, in the first term, they're carving the braces, but we're just trying to get them not cut themselves. We're trying to make sure that they don't carve the braces away.
Yep.
And then we talk about a little bit. In the second term, we're actually taking the top and I'm voicing it with them to show them that the braces, how they're carved and where they're placed on the inside for tonal considerations are not random at all. They are not random. And so that's the next level. There are enrichment classes that they can pick up along the way that tie in with those items, but they're generally a Saturday thing.
Yep.
But the last one, that would be term 3. They can build an archtop guitar, which has voicings and tunings of the top and back that are akin to like a violin, what the violin would be. It's one thing to figure all this out and take it flat and then carve the braces and do all that, but it's another thing to hand tune and voice something out of a square block of wood that becomes a 3-dimensional object.
Yeah. So that's how that works.
It's very.
I was actually going to ask you that. Do you actually like steam and bend the wood?
Yeah,
or it's actually carved.
It's actually carved. Yeah. No, the archtop plates are carved, and we do it on the CNC right now to save time, but they're way heavy.
Wow.
Then at that point, we weigh them, and we start carving on them until we start to release its voice. That's where the voice goes from like this, and all of a sudden it starts to open up. Okay, and that's damping that does that. Remember that that's not necessarily a bad thing. Damping is a topic to be controlled to help the voice of the instrument.
Wow.
Some may want it more open and crystally, sparkly. Others may want it just a little bit dampened so they can hit it harder.
Yep.
There's different types of players. But when you're finished on an arch-topped instrument, I say that not to exclude violins because it's the same thought. I have the entire guitar completely strung up in the white, no finish, and then I'm playing it. And then I sit there as I play it, and I carve on the back, and I carve on the top to get it to flex the right amount, to get it to couple together, and what's known as the...
So this is where art takes over.
In musical ability, when you're in musical instruments like I am long enough, eventually you're going to be sitting in Cremona, Italy. You're going to go right back to where the sources are. And I do that at least once every 2 years, generally once a year, just to remind me. And then at that point, you still remember the tradition and master to apprentice and not just the tradition of people making instruments, but the wood sawyers and everything in between. I mean, it's truly a community-driven thing. And when you're sitting down carving an arched-topped instrument and tuning and voicing it in the white, it's a different level of art.
Wow.
It isn't the color, and it's not an inlay, and the best instruments. Yeah, the best instruments that are carved that can do that. You open up its voice, plus you're setting the pitch for the top and back to collaborate with that entire instrument. That's the highest level.
That's crazy.
I did an interview for NAMM 2 years ago, and this guy, just to be mean, asked me what my favorite tool was because I'm a luthier. And it's a horrible thing to ask. But after for a thought for a second. I have a roll. I have I'll sit right here so that I can look right at everybody.
Sure.
Right there is one of my most favorite things in the world. Those are chisels that I've picked up in garage sales.
Wow.
And any one of those are what I use to voice the tops and backs of guitars. When I pull that out, and if I have a cup of coffee, this is going to be a very good day.
That's your happy spot, huh?
Oh yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So do you think of yourself as a creator? Like you're creating, not only you create guitars, you've created a school, you create other luthiers, and you're also you're writing a book.
Yes.
Correct?
I am.
Which is a huge undertaking. I think it's something probably almost everybody's like, oh, I want to write a book. But to do it, to move forward on it, That's a huge deal. What's that process been like?
Well, the software that we developed was it's still the most powerful software of its type in the business, and people will become hip to it. But I never let it out because I knew where all the holes were. They probably weren't going to find them, but I knew where they were. I'm the developer of that, right? So this whole time over the past 10, 12 years has been to find the holes and fix it and repair it and learn. And it's a great learning tool.
Do you program too? Or are you a
No,
programmer or
no.
You have a programmer?
Yeah, Paul Perpich. He's from just outside of Lansing.
Oh, cool.
And he's been incredibly important because he is a guitar enthusiast, and he does repair guitars, but he's a programmer, old school programmer, and he really, this would not have happened without him. I mean, he was hired.
Sure.
But I can't tell you how much he was the right guy.
Yeah.
You know, he certainly has taken his share of abuse with us. But coming around to that statement about the book, when I got into reverse profiling of old vintage instruments, that means you'd have to take an instrument that you're focusing on. And in this case, it was a 1937 D18 Martin, which, by the way, is a very great guitar. And I had it in my hands for a while. I did some repairs on it, and then we in turn sold it to Vince Gill. I think he still has it.
Really?
Yeah, when you're going to reverse profile it, you can take it, you can weigh it. And then you can tap on it and get the resonant frequencies. And then you can take and put weights on the top and watch the top and back deflect. But you can't get its density because the instrument's already built. So we took it to a CAT scan. And we'd run it through a CAT scan, and now we can get densities of all the woods. Now, if you say, okay, it sounds like this, these are the frequencies, these are the second order harmonics, then it probably started out here. You know, it's highly probable, but now you have to build one. Well, I was about 4 guitars into that, and my friend Joe Glazier, who's a Nashville guy, very important repair person, an instigator for sure. But he said, you know, we really should do a book. And I was thinking, yeah, we could do that. I was thinking, we're going to make the book like this. You open it up, it's going to have these beautiful photos of vintage instruments, and like the people will never be able to get their hands on, and then it'll have the stats for it, the math stats.
Oh, wow.
Top frequency, back frequency, air frequency, second order harmonics, weights, dimensions, because there are geeks out there that totally would want to do that.
Yeah.
That was my scope of the book. So now let's talk
which is a big enough scope to begin with.
Well, yeah, well, you know, it's a team effort. We have Tom Nania, who is a former student who now is a trained acoustician, and he was trained at Notre Dame, Indiana. Now he's working in Long Island, in Ferndale, at D'Addario. We talked about that. That's who I was just visiting them.
Yeah, cool.
And then we have Joe Glazier, who's nothing but connections. And then the other guy's Dustin Miller. Dustin Miller is just an incredible researcher. I had no idea what I was getting into. We talked about, and people have experienced scope creep before, take it and times it by 100, and that's what happened with this thing. So when the book finishes up, Dustin has really dedicated thousands of hours to researching this. And he's the photographer, and how deep he's gone is going to be incredible. Joe is, like I said, he's the bonding force. And Tom, my former student, who now is an acoustician, his level of acoustics understanding and what to bring to the table to open up ideas for the next generation through this conduit is incredible. Me, I'm the guy that was there first thinking about it 20 years ago, and my contributions to the book are physical evidence and application. In other words, well, actually, I did do this. And, you know, let's talk about this, because it's not that book is a conclusion. It's just another piece of the story.
So what is the synopsis of the book? Like what is it?
First off, no, that's a good question. The answer is this: we focused on Martin Guitar Company dreadnoughts made between 1933 and 1943. The reason 1933 was the introduction officially of the dreadnought in the Martin guitar catalog, and we chose Martin guitars because their a level of consistency as a workforce during that time is unmatched. They're the gold standard for that. Wow. And to make those guitars with that consistency during that time, you know that there's two things involved, and that is a great workforce that wants to be there and great leadership.
Interesting.
You know that. I mean,
Yeah.
the Martin Guitar Company during that time had great leadership. And if you look through the records at the Martin Guitar plant, they employed the town. So these people were talking about guitars at
Yeah,
the
the
picnic
bars,
table, at the dinner table. But 1943, there was a disruption because of World War II. You know, you have pre-war, wartime, and post-war guitars. I have what got me thinking about it is I have a 1943 D28 in this shop, which, by the way, is a very valuable instrument now. But it's quirky because it's a war-era guitar, and you could see a break at that point. So the person who was tuning the tops and the person who was doing certain things, he probably had just left. And now somebody was trying to figure out what that guy.
Crazy.
And so what he was doing is what I believe. I think that that individual was hand tuning the tops and backs. And then the next person didn't know how to do that. So he probably drew templates off of this guy's work and they were replicated. Well, you know, form follows function and function follows form are two entirely different schools of thoughts. When you carve, if you look at the inside of a classic voiced instrument, flat type steel string, every dimension on the outside is perfect. Outside here on a Martin guitar, we're talking precision, German precision. And then you look at the inside and the braces are all different sizes, just because they were hand tuned.
That's cool.
The braces themselves will tell a story.
So your book would effectively allow somebody to reverse engineer one of the premium guitars of the last century? Is that the idea? Well, you know,
the book will have a lot of photos, a lot of historic photos. It'll talk about the history of the Dreadnought, pre-history of the Dreadnought. It'll go into sourcing of materials, where they source their materials, why they did. There'll be some disruption. You know, there'll be some incendiary issues we'll have to deal with in the general public.
Yeah.
But it's in writing by Old Man Martin's own handwriting. So
this
it's
is
right.
both the story of Martin guitars,
Dreadnought.
the Dreadnought, as well as then the specs and the science and.
So it's going to be the history of that, how they sourced their wood, what problems did they have.
That's exciting.
And then it's going to have the pictures will be second to none, high resolution. These are guitars that you could never ever get your hands on.
Oh yeah, these are priceless guitars.
I've walked into a room, you know, bigger than the size of this room, where there were 3 rows of Martins all the way around the room hanging on the walls, and the minimum price of any of those was $270,000. And I'm telling you that there was 80 of them in there, and 2 of them were D45s, which is a Dreadnought, but that instrument was a Brazilian rosewood and pearled from one end to the other. That was $1 million guitar. So those pictures are going to be in that book.
That's cool.
Along with some stats.
Unbelievable.
Then it'll be backed up by a website. There will be even more stats on for people who want to go there and geek out.
Cool. This is cool. So when is this going to be available? Do you know yet?
July.
Right on.
We're very close. The meeting we just had, I had to be a half hour late. That's just them hounding me to get my portion in because, you know, Joe's knows what he's doing, and Dustin knows what he's doing, and Tom Nania is very technical. But my portion of this book is very human interest. It's more like a Hallmark made-for-TV movie than it is anything else. I'll just talk about a lot of like what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Why did Project Dreadnought? Why does it exist?
Yeah.
You know how things are. I mean, it comes to light like that, and you just do it.
Cool. Yeah, good for you. But again, there again, and it doesn't seem to be something that's really hindered you a whole lot in your life. But I think a lot of people just get to this point, and they're like, for one reason or another, it just doesn't. It's a great idea. It's right there, and then it doesn't materialize. And it's just taking that leap and just starting it, and letting it unfold. Let the scope go where it's going to go, and you probably maybe for you it's too natural because you're used to taking a block of wood, and you end up in a month, carving the front of it while you're playing. But it's pretty incredible to see, and obviously the way that your mind works with creation is certainly conducive to that book. So I'm excited.
Oh, it's going to be a good one.
Nice.
Like I said, it's going to be big.
Yeah.
I don't. That doesn't always equate to great, but a lot of it's going to be pictures. And if you're a guitar lover, and for those collectors out there, the Martin guitar dreadnoughts during that time period are the pinnacle. And I'll make sure you get your hands on one today before you bug out. And
That would be like me swinging Tiger Woods' golf clubs. I don't know if that.
well, yeah, no, but it will have its positive impact on my community.
It's awesome.
It'll be the biggest, but it'll be the biggest. I come back to work because big doesn't mean better. It'll be the most comprehensive book of its kind that I doubt will ever be replicated.
Yeah, it's
because it's talking about something that happened within a certain history, and the research on it is so in depth. There's just no more to uncover.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. It's clear the contribution you've made to your community anyway is well, it's certainly unprecedented in recent history. I'm sure you wouldn't. You seem to teach humility here as much as you teach guitar building. But your reputation in the community, which again nowadays you can verify pretty easily on Google, but seeing it with the people that are students here, talking with other people in the community. I mean, you're a creator. You're somebody that's definitely added a lot already, even before this book, to your community and continue to do so. And you've certainly created a legacy. So
Well,
I really appreciate all the time and the insights today. It's been awesome. And like I said, I've been like a starstruck this whole time in this place because it's pretty hallowed and it's really neat to be part of. So I appreciate it.
Well, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to sit down with you and talk about this. It's easy stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
Now that I know that you're a bona fide junkie, we'll make sure we look at some guitars on the way out the door.
I'm going to take you up on that.
But I can't wait to hear this podcast.
Absolutely.
Keep it going.
Absolutely. So just to confirm all the details. So Galloup Guitars, if you are interested in becoming a luthier, it's on the internet. You guys have a really good web presence. GALLOUP guitars. You have multiple courses which are described. I was talking with one of your students. So one of the things I found really cool is actually you can use your GI Bill to come to the school. So this is a qualified educational institution that is GI Bill applicable.
And Voc Rehab.
And Voc Rehab.
So if you have some injury, a lot of military people already are 25% or more. There's just hearing or it could be anything, but they'll send you here for 6 months. Wow. and set you up with a woodworking shop.
That's awesome, and you will be amongst an amazing group of people in a very cool spot of the world, and learn a very cool skill that's got multiple applications. In fact, the guy I was talking to now, he's a road technician, tours with Justin Timberlake, Avril Lavigne, Janet Jackson, all these people.
Stevie Wonder.
Yeah. So, and
he came through on the bill.
Yeah.
And his buddy came through on the bill. Military people do really well in our shop because it's a structured shop. It's not come in and we're going to give you some wood and we hope you feel good about it. We have an agenda and the agenda's going to be taking place, and we give them the guidance that they need when they need it, and we also allot a lot of space for them to ease into that learning process.
No, it's super cool, and it's commendable, but and it's a huge deal. I think that would be an awesome way to transition from the military. A lot of people, I know I can speak for myself. Transitioning out of the military is difficult. I think across the board because it's a very different world, and you're trying to figure out how to navigate it. And a lot of times, you're looking for something structured. You're looking for a new skill, something that's going to take you places. And certainly, music can do that. Certainly, this skill set could do that.
There's many programs, Guitars for Vets, that we've been a part of. People that are having difficulty making adjustments, which is common. Mm-hmm. And moving into a place like this, and by the way, there are other situations out there that need to be looked at, can be a great way to segue back. I mean, not only are you learning how to make guitars, but you're learning, general woodworking skills, just a lot of good stuff along the way. But that's one thing that I have put into the program recently is short 1 week training sessions. Because for many people, they just don't know if they even want to just commit that 2 months. And so the biggest thing is just come in, spend a week. It's going to be a little more money, you know, we have to do it that way. But you come in for 1 week and you walk away with a guitar completed. Now, it's not the same as like coming for 2 months. This is a different type of class. It's very much tech-oriented, CNC, CAD, laser, plec. But you do walk away with a guitar. But that's a great way to come into a school like mine, a trade school, and get your feet wet.
Yeah, and you'll know in a week.
You'll know.
Probably, I would say most people are going to be like, you know what?
One day.
Yeah,
One day.
I'm doing the 2 months. Sign me up.
Yeah.
But you'll know quickly. So that's awesome. Well, again, you should definitely check it out. If you are a guitar enthusiast, I would definitely save up some money and buy a Galloup guitar. But
Definitely. But remember that the doors are always open for anybody that wants to stop by. This is an old-time guitar shop. Come on in. We'll give you a tour. You can hang out for the whole day. We don't care.
Super cool. Bryan, really appreciate it. What you've done here is special, and thanks for letting me take a look.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome.